What you know, alibis. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Friday, May 9th. I'm recapping yesterday's testimony. Yesterday was just one of those days, but we are back and raring to go today. I'll have the recap of today's testimony out later tonight. The first witness and the only witness on the stand yesterday was Yuriy Bukhenik. He is a sergeant with the Massachusetts State Police. He took the call around 6:44 a.m. that was requesting them to take the case. Trooper Proctor was assigned to be on call, and the witness was Proctor's supervisor. He told Proctor to follow up with the Canton Police Department. Later on, Proctor updated the witness on what was known at that point. The witness left his home around 8:50 in the morning and got to the Canton Police Department at 9:15. The scene at 34 Fairview had already been cleared, and given the state of the weather conditions at the time, they decided to stay at the police department to get things done, like get information, collect evidence, if that had been done. He and Proctor met with multiple Canton officers, including Sergeant Good. They were shown the broken cocktail glass, and they were also given John's cell phone. They did see that paper bag with the red Solo cups inside. They learned there was a loose family connection with a Canton detective associated with the 34 Fairview address. So out of caution, they decided to step away from any interview investigation assistance. He said it didn't change his involvement, but it brought up a concern of manpower with their limited staff and the weather conditions making it worse. Once they saw the evidence that had been collected so far, they decided to speak with who was in last contact with John and also present at the scene when John was found. They had heard statements made by Karen questioning if she had hit him, and he said at that point they were ruling people out more than they were ruling people in. They interviewed Matt and Jen McCabe, and Brian Albert was at the McCabe residence when this took place. They interviewed Matt and Jim McCabe and Brian Albert at the McCabe residence. After that, they went to the hospital so the witness could go see John and his injuries, just to verify what the witnesses were describing and also the evidence they had found at the scene. They saw John around 12:30 or 1 o'clock on the 29th. At the hospital, they spoke with medical personnel who told them Karen had been discharged and that John was still in the emergency room and they could go view him. John was covered with a sheet and there was a pile of clothing on the floor at his feet. He saw injuries on John, and the crime scene department documented those injuries with photographs. He saw the pooling of blood under his head, swelling and discoloration of his eyes, also blood pooling underneath the eyelids, a laceration to his eye. The left nostril had a small laceration. There were cuts and bruises to the right arm that extended from the mid forearm up to the mid tricep area and concentrated on the exterior of the arm and not the interior. There was a light bruise on the back of his right hand, and he had cuts and scrapes to his right knee. The witness said the clothing being on the floor isn't uncommon, and the reason is because of medical treatment. The clothing was picked up and it was identified item by item, and then they bagged it. He said the clothing was soaking wet and had debris on it. What stood out was they were missing a shoe of John's. They double-checked to make sure it wasn't accidentally left behind in the ambulance. He said at that point, their theory evolved to this being a vehicle strike due to John's injuries, and he thought John had been knocked out of his shoes. He assumed the shoe would be where John was found or initially struck by the vehicle. They did not go back to the scene to look because timing was essential. They needed to get to each location that could possibly have evidence that could be destroyed, altered, or concealed. And with the resources they had at the time, he talked to his bosses and he said he would get resources to get this search done, and that was the Massachusetts State Police. They needed to talk to the person who last saw him, and that was Karen. With the missing shoe and her stating, "Did I hit him?" he was interested in looking at the SUV. So Karen gave him the address to her parents' house. They got to Karen around 3 p.m., and at one point, Trooper Proctor took a call from Jennifer McCabe, who provided more information. They wanted to look at that rear right taillight. They called the Dighton PD to tell them they were coming to investigate and likely seize a car, so he wanted them to be able to get in touch with a tow truck. Once in the driveway, he saw the Lexus with the back facing him, and he waited for the Dighton PD. So he and Proctor walked up the driveway. He could see there was a large piece of red taillight cover missing on her car. Proctor got within 3 feet but did not touch the car. They went to the front door and knocked, but there was some piled up snow and they couldn't get that storm door opened. So Mr. Reed had them come in through the garage door. Inside was Mr. and Mrs. Reed, and Karen was sitting on the couch. Karen said she was willing to answer questions, but would not go into too many details. She said John was hanging with a friend of his at John's house, then later went to CF McCarthy's, which is where she met him around 9 p.m. She was drinking vodka sodas and John was drinking Bud Light. After that, they went to Waterfall, and Karen was asked if she brought a beverage from McCarthy's to the Waterfall, and she didn't think so. After they left Waterfall, she dropped John off at 34 Fairview. They asked Karen if she saw him go inside, and she did not. She was asked about the damage to the taillight, and she said, "I don't know how I did it last night." After she dropped John off, she made a 3-point turn and then she left. They asked her to explain how John sustained the injuries that he had. Karen said she did not see any injuries that night, but he bumped his head a few nights prior, and John asked her about it, which seemed strange to the witness. After that conversation concluded, Karen was told her car and her cell phone were being seized, and they were doing that to prevent any alteration or destruction of evidence before they could obtain a search warrant. Karen gave them the key fob to the car, and around 4:15 p.m., it was loaded up onto a tow truck, and then they followed that tow truck to the police department. They had the Sally Port heated to be able to melt the snow that was on the car. Crime Scene Services would have photographed and fingerprinted the car and also take swabs for DNA. The witness helped put up yellow tape around the car, and other members of the Canton Police Department were there. He said he never saw Trooper Proctor touch the car. He and Proctor left the Sally Port, and at some point, he said he's sure that Trooper Proctor walked away from him. From there, the witness went into the dispatch area and later to the conference room, which was their meeting location. Officers who were there at the scene that morning came back, and they all exchanged information as far as what each person had learned so far. As far as John's clothes, they were wet and they were put into a bag. That bag stayed in the back of the witness's car on the floorboard and stayed with him as he traveled that night to investigate further. He didn't touch the bag again until he took that inside the Canton DA's office around 8 p.m. on the 29th, and that went to the state police section where they do evidence processing. From there, they laid the clothes out to dry. He explains he took butcher paper and laid it on the floor, and notes Proctor was there with him. It took several days for the clothes to dry. After they dried, they were later removed and bagged and put into an evidence locker in a secure area where access is limited. The items that were put in the locker was a two-tone sweatshirt, an orange t-shirt, a pair of jeans, a belt, and a pair of boxers. They bring out the pants to show to the jury, and he learned the sneaker was found at the scene at 34 Fairview. They bring that in and show the jury, as well as the t-shirt and a sweatshirt. They met and discussed the next steps, and the witness wanted to go back to 34 Fairview to look for the hat. He also was planning to start writing search warrants. The weather was getting better, and he went there on February 3rd for the first time around 8:30 or 9:30 in the morning with other members of his unit, including Trooper DeChico, Trooper Proctor, and Trooper Evan Brent. There was also someone from Crime Scene Services there as well. They mainly focused on the lawn, and they found a number of pieces of plastic. They bring those into the courtroom and show the jury. They also show photos of where they were found. They also found a black drinking straw on the paved berm near the street, about 15 to 20 feet away from the fire hydrant. They found the hat under a foot and a half of snow in the grass. It was frozen and flat. Eventually, the bags were sealed once all the items were inside and brought back to the office. They went back every day as the temperature started to rise and snow melted, which exposed more items of evidence. He got a call on February 4th from someone at the Canton Police Department. He was on his way to 34 Fairview as part of this daily check. He explained they had somebody ride by every day. And at this point, he found another piece of the taillight. On February 10th, the snow had melted a lot, and he was with Trooper Proctor. They found several more pieces of taillight, but he did not have crime scene come out to photograph where they were found due to the fact it was found in the same general area as the others. He got video from CF McCarthy's and the waterfall, as well as John's residence and dash camera from officers that responded to the scene. He was asked to provide his DNA, and he consented. He said it's not common, but sometimes it does happen. He was Michael Proctor's supervisor. The witness had a state police phone, and he was on a specific text chain with Michael Proctor and others. When this text chain started, he was working at Boston Logan Airport directing traffic. He put a thumbs up to acknowledge the text chain, but did not respond. He said he did not look through the entire text chain because he was working. The alert came through his Apple Watch, and that's where he gave that thumbs up. The state police found 2 sustained findings regarding that text chain, and it had consequences for the witness. The first was for failure to adequately supervise, and the second was regarding a review of the quarterly performance of Trooper Proctor. The witness was punished, and he lost 5 vacation days. The Commonwealth points out the witness still works in homicide, and he's a sergeant. He did review the text chain through documents provided during the internal investigation. Well, they bring those texts into court, and he doesn't remember much about it. He doesn't recognize the photo that they're showing him. He doesn't know who authored specific text messages. A few minutes into this line of questioning, he's asked if he thinks it was Trooper Proctor, and he says yes. So they have him read some of these text messages. August 17th, 2022 at 9:44 p.m., Trooper Proctor to the group. Funny, I'm going through and he uses a derogatory term that starts with our client's phone. No nudes so far. I hate that man. I truly hate him. They go back to video from John's house from January 28th and the 29th. 7:18 a.m. on the 28th, you see a kid get in a car and the car leaves. 5:05, John arrives back with who I believe to be his niece, and they go inside the house. 7:36 p.m. on the 28th, the white car backs out. Karen's phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. They looked for Ring video, but there was none for that time frame. January 29th at 5:07 a.m., there is a video from John's of her backing out, and then you see what looks to be her hitting John's car. 5:46, there's video of Karen, Jen, and Carrie arriving, but there was no video of them leaving. 7:05 a.m., there is a man going in the house. At 8:23, we see those police coming for that welfare check. 10:36 a.m., Paul and Mrs. O'Keefe arrive. 12:04 p.m., Karen and her dad and brother arrive. 12:35, somebody comes out and wipes snow off the back of the Lexus and opens that right front passenger door. Just a disclaimer, I'm very, very new to this case. I'm learning daily. As testimony comes out, I do not know the facts of this case, so I cannot identify who's who in these videos. 12:40, there are several people outside wiping snow off of the windows and then getting into cars. There was no video of the Lexus being taken from John's house by police on that Ring camera. Back at the Sally Port, he looked at that rear tail light and noticed it was missing a large red portion of the lens. He says the photo being shown on screen is 100% consistent with what he saw that day. They go back to that video where it looks like she hit John's car, and as she turns to leave, he points out that tail light is broken. He also says that is consistent to the condition of when the car was brought into the Sally Port. There is a still photo from the welfare check of the kids, and again, consistent with how it looked when it came into the Sally Port. The difference in this photo is there is snow packed in that area, but the damage was still consistent. They did get video of them loading the Lexus onto the tow truck, and then they bring in a lot of surveillance from CF McCarthy's and the Waterfall Bar. He said they were looking for clothing descriptions, any aggressive behavior, and also alcohol intake. The CF McCarthy footage goes from 9:03 up until 10:53. At 9:03, we see Karen come in and John puts his arm around her. Between 10:09 and 10:53, it's just socializing and drinking. At 10:54 p.m., they arrive at the waterfall, and at 12:10 a.m., they leave. When John and Karen leave, you see in John's right hand, he is holding a cocktail glass with a black plastic straw. The Commonwealth mentions that they gave video showing Karen backing out and possibly hitting John's car to a company called Aperture, who are reconstruction specialists. On cross, Proctor was the lead and the case agent, and in that position, he had a leadership role in the investigation. The witness said he's more of a liaison between the DA's office and the state police, and he facilitates tasks that need to be completed. They go back and forth for a hot minute on the verbiage of lead investigator versus case agent, and the witness will not agree and say that Proctor was the lead investigator in the case. Defense, it's your responsibility to supervise your team to be sure the investigation is done adequately. They talk about integrity while investigating. And the witness said if that was a question, those individuals would not be a part of the investigation. But the defense says that includes knowing what your subordinates are doing. The witness says they collaborate and they do their best to conduct the investigation with integrity and honor. Defense, but if you don't supervise properly, it increases chances for mistakes and bias. And the witness says that's one possibility. The defense says, but there are chances that bias is seeping into the case and you want to make sure that doesn't happen. The witness says, I believe all humans have biases, especially in this case, but it didn't affect the case. And they go back and forth for a bit about this. The defense says, especially in a homicide investigation involving a police officer, you have to have an intimate knowledge of what they're doing and actually supervise them. The witness says, absolutely. We're professionals and we ensure the adequacy of the investigation. Defense, do you believe this investigation was conducted with the highest level of integrity? And the witness said, yes, everything they collected pointed in one direction and there was no bias. Defense, you're trying to distance yourself from naming Michael Proctor as the lead investigator in this case. But the witness says there is no leading in any direction. He was the case officer. He was on call a month prior. He was not assigned this case, but when it happened, he was the one on call. Defense, do you think Proctor, being the case agent, affected the investigation? The witness said the investigation was done with honor and integrity. And the defense says, by Proctor? And the witness repeats, it was done with honor and integrity, and the evidence pointed in one direction. Defense says, you don't want to answer my question. The defense says, you know, Proctor had input in every part of this case as the case officer. The witness said he managed the case and Proctor didn't have a major role. The defense repeats the question and the witness repeats his answer. Moving on to how the physical evidence in this case was handled. He hands him a Verizon record from Karen's phone, but the witness said that he doesn't agree that's what this is. This is a VIN number for a vehicle. The search warrant was requested by Proctor. The witness turns to the page showing the search warrant for Karen's cell phone. The witness said that the photo quality he is looking at on the stand is poor, but he can read part of it. The defense asks who requested this, and the witness says Proctor. The defense asks about another one. The witness said he hasn't read all the details and he can't say he has seen it before. But the defense says, you can't say Proctor did this without your knowledge. The witness says he can't say Proctor did this. The defense asks, is it a forgery? And the witness says no, but he doesn't know who produced it. They go through several search warrants, and each time the defense asks, was it Trooper Proctor who requested it? And it was yes. The defense says Proctor was involved in a lot of things on a day-to-day basis. The witness said there were over 100 reports written in this case. There was a lot of evidence and a lot of people involved in this investigation. Defense, even as a supervisor, you don't know everything Proctor was doing. The witness obviously says it's impossible to know everything everybody was doing. On January 29th, the witness and Trooper Proctor never went to 34 Fairview. At some point in the morning, once it was determined John was gravely injured and transported with no signs of life, they were advised he had a 10% survival rate. That's when they responded to the Canton Police Department. Then he says it was decided not to continue working with the Canton PD because of a conflict or the perception of a potential conflict, not that one existed. We recused from doing any interviews. Defense, the lawn where he was found was Brian Albert's, and his brother Kevin worked as a detective for the Canton PD. The witness says that is why they took those steps. Defense, your first documented action was calling the medical examiner's office at 10:41 a.m. to tell the medical examiner John was struck in the face with a cocktail glass, or at least appeared to be. The witness said that is part of what he advised the medical examiner of. The defense asked for a sidebar, and when he comes back, he asked the same question. The witness said that sounds accurate to what I might have said. Defense, in the early morning hours, you believed there was a possibility of a physical altercation? Yes. What steps that morning did you take to see if anyone in the house may have been involved in a potential altercation? The witness said, I personally did not go inside. Defense, you didn't go inside the house. You did not secure the yard as a crime scene. You didn't search the house. There were no photos of the interior of the house taken. You didn't ask a criminalist to process the house. You didn't set up a crime scene log to see who's going in and out of the crime scene. And each time the witness says no. He didn't contact crime scene services to 34 Fairview on the 29th. The defense asks about interviews that were conducted that day. The first was Sergeant Good at the Canton Police Department. The second, third, and fourth interviews were conducted at a residence in Canton and not at 34 Fairview. The witness agrees. The defense asks if Trooper Proctor spoke to Jen McCabe while she was at 34 Fairview. The witness said he does not know where Jennifer was. Defense, you interviewed Jennifer and Matt McCabe and Brian Albert and Karen that day. You got to Karen's at 3:34 p.m. That morning, you interviewed Brian, Jen, and Matt, and they all were with John and Karen the night before at the waterfall. And the same three are in the house when John arrived. And the witness said John was dropped off on the lawn. Defense, these are people who have motive to lie if they were involved. Do suspects ever lie to you all the time? The witness says all the time isn't accurate. They will create alibis and give contradicting facts and stories. Defense, you didn't ask Jim McCabe to come to the station. And when you interviewed her, Brian Albert was there? Yes. Do you find that odd? No. You're conducting a formal interview in a homicide case, and you have an extra person show up at a house just to be there? The witness said cooperating witnesses always try to be assisting. The defense says, always? Who you call a cooperating witness could be a suspect who's lying, and the witness says that's possible. Regarding the physical evidence, the clothing at the hospital that was on the floor, he shows the witness a photo of the clothing. He goes through and identifies the orange shirt on the floor. The witness points to it and says it's on top of a darker item of clothing, possibly the jeans that John was wearing, but he can't tell. They show a photo of John's legs and feet, and in the corner of the photo, you see clothing on top of what looks to me like a blue duffel bag. The defense says John's right knee. Do you see any injuries? No. They show a photo of a notepad binder sitting on a chair The witness doesn't know if it was his or Trooper Proctor's. As far as the two shirts, did you bag those? The witness said that he and Trooper Proctor bagged those together. He thinks Proctor picked it up and the witness held the bag, but it could be vice versa. The bag was a large bag, and he compares it to the size of what you would put leaves in. It was provided by the crime scene unit. And all the clothing, the bag, the jeans, the belt, the boxers, it went into the same bag. The defense says you went from the hospital to Karen's and you put the bag in your truck. From Karen's, you went to the Canton Police Department, and from there, you ended up back at the DA's office where you and Proctor had an office. When did you lay out the wet clothing? And the witness said during the evening hours. The defense says last year you testified it was around 10 p.m. when you put the clothes on the butcher paper. The witness said he would need to look, so they hand him a transcript. And he says, when asked about what time, I indicated it was approximately 10 p.m. The defense says, but you didn't stay all night with the clothes and you left them with Proctor. The witness said they laid the clothes out together. He doesn't know if Proctor left with him or stayed to continue working. Defense, the clothing stayed in the room from January 29th to February 4th. Then on the 4th, they were bagged. Who had access to the clothing in those days? The witness said anyone with proper key card authorization, and that includes Trooper Proctor, but he does not know who bagged them after they were dried. The defense hammers that Proctor would be the one to bag the clothing up. The witness said not necessarily. The evidence officers do that. Defense, how would they know unless the case agent told them? The witness said they walk by it daily. We communicate daily. They would know it's dry, so let's bag it up. The defense asked if there was a log in that 6-day period when the clothes were drying showing who may have come in, handled, touched, manipulated those clothes. The witness said he has never seen a log. Defense, we don't have a single document establishing the chain of custody from January 29th to February 4th. And the witness says that is absolutely not correct. The defense says, well, where is it? The witness said, we received it. It was processed. And the defense says a log. The witness said, we didn't create a log to document the documentation. It would have really been redundant. Defense, February 4th and February 10th. You participated in 2 searches at 34 Fairview. The witness said that's not right. I was also there on the 3rd, 4th, and the 10th. On the 3rd, he was there with DeChico, Proctor, and the witness said he did the first excavation in the morning. February 4th, the Canton Police Department documented one piece. He collected that, and then the same thing on the 10th. As far as what they found and when, February 3rd, they found John's hat, that black drinking straw, and red and clear taillight pieces. On February 4th, the Canton Police Department found another red taillight piece, and they notified the witness he was already on his way to 34 Fairview. The defense asked if it was Sergeant Lank who notified him, and he doesn't know. He said it was raining hard, he grabbed the item, and he left. Defense, did you write any report about your search on the 3rd? And the witness said someone did. Defense says, I'm asking about you. The witness would have to look, but he does not remember offhand. Defense, no report was written about any of these searches until November 4th, 2023, and the witness said that is possible. The defense points out this is 17, 18 months later. The witness said that is not true. The evidence went into the bag and the date and time was documented. But the defense says a report is to document everything. Who was there when it was found, what time, where. And in this case, there were 3 searches with you, Proctor, DeChico, and Canton police officers. And there was no report until nearly 18 months later. The witness said that's possible. They write reports at different times. Defense, February 4th, you visit the crime scene. You said you arrived between 8:45 and 9 a.m. Did you know Chief of Police Ken Berkowitz before then? The witness had met him. He was present on the 29th when the car was delivered to the Sallyport, and they had a conversation. He's asked about his relationship with Brian Higgins as of January of 2022. The witness said Higgins was a federal agent. They did cross paths on a couple of investigations, but there was not a personal relationship. Defense, did you know he had a relationship with Chief Berkowitz? He said in an interview he was one of his better friends. The witness says, if you show me a report authorized by me, but I don't have memory of that. Defense, you were contacted on February 4th and told to go by 34 Fairview because Chief Berkowitz drove by and saw something. The witness said Berkowitz saw a piece of potential evidence. The defense says he was driving by at speed. How old was he when you met him out there? And the witness is like, I don't know. Defense, did you ask how he could see a piece of red plastic from his car or why he was even driving by in the first place? Or if he was even aware his department had been conflicted in part from the case because, as you said, of a perceived conflict of interest? The witness said no, he didn't think that information was important. The defense says, but days earlier, the Canton Police Department recused themselves from the interviews because a brother of the homeowner is a homicide detective. The chief drives by and sees a piece of taillight. There is an objection that's sustained. The defense says the chief of the Canton Police Department was there when you pulled up. And that's where we ended testimony for yesterday. So later on this evening, I will have today's testimony recapped and out for you. If you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to hit subscribe and like the videos. It's the easiest way to support the podcast and the YouTube channel, and I appreciate you doing that. Also, big thank you to my mods who have been rocking it every single day in chat, keeping it civil, making sure it doesn't get out of hand. They do some hard work, and I'm super, super grateful for them. And all y'all who choose to come watch with the Alibis. We've had a very busy week, planning to do a little update episode over the weekend on some developments in Lori Daybell, as well as Donna Adelson, who has a hearing today. So that is it for now. I hope you guys have a good rest of your Friday afternoon, and we will see you soon.